Welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and today I am really excited about our guest. It's been a long time since I've had the chance to sit down and talk with Max Lucado, one of the premier Christian authors of our day. And he has a new book out. It says, You'll Get Through This, which is a resource that I think you'll find to be very timely. I don't care what you're struggling with. Maybe you're in the middle of a struggle. Maybe you want to have this to help somebody else through a struggle. It is terrific. And we had a chance to Skype him in and have a great conversation with none other than Max Lucado. Well, today I have the opportunity and the honor to interview somebody that really needs no introduction, and that's Max Lucado. And I'm sure at one time or another you have read one of his books, and so many of them have ministered to me. And I was just talking to him off camera. 316 was one of those books, but now I hold in my hand a book I think you're going to see and have as a real resource. It's called You'll Get Through This: Hope and Help for the Turbulent Times, a book that Max has authored that deals with the story of Joseph in the Bible. So, Max, what a delight to have you, my friend.
Well, Perry, thank you. It's a great honor to be on your program and share this time with you.
Did you write all those books behind you?
I haven't even read all these books.
Hey, this latest book is really a treasure. What made you to go into the life of Joseph to pull this out?
Well, I've been a pastor now for over 30 years, and just like any other pastor, I talk to people quite often who are passing through difficult times. And the story of Joseph has, for me, always been a go-to story to help people get through tough times. And so it just seemed right, that I wanted to create a book that would help people when they're facing challenges with an inspirational and theologically sound explanation. And Joseph is that person, and Joseph is that story.
Do you think it's interesting that here we have more technology to get the gospel out today, and especially in America? I mean, we have Christian radio and television and some of the greatest authors, yourself being one of them, in the world, and yet Americans are facing harder times than ever before. Have you seen that increase?
Yeah, I don't know if we can say there's more struggles. You look back through history and you see some generations and times people faced unsurmountable struggles. But I think what's different is our understanding of God, or our lack of understanding. Mm-hmm. On one extreme, we have secularism that dismisses God. And so that worldview says any kind of struggle is just random. There's no control. There's no solution. On the other extreme is a view of God that says, God failed. If there's struggle, that means that God failed, or he didn't do what I wanted him to do. So this person is disappointed with God. This person has no God. And so I think those two streams of thought are circulating in our society. We don't really have a good theology of tough times. We don't have a good theology of suffering. And I think we need one.
Well, the scripture says there's a fellowship in suffering.
That's right. And there's fellowship with God through suffering. There's fellowship with each other through suffering. What the Bible teaches us is that there is a God on the throne. He is still sovereign. He's not blind to the struggles. He's not baffled by our struggles. Just the opposite. He uses our struggles to advance his cause. This was the promise of Joseph. When he said to his brothers, you intended evil, but God meant it for good. This is the promise of the New Testament, too. So this is a steady theme that we have to give people who are passing through tough times.
All right. Do all of these tough times have something in common? And I don't want to minimize any of those pains because they are genuine and severe in their individual cases. But is there a commonality among tough things?
There are some commonalities. Tough times come from one of two sources. I'm not saying anything no one knows. Some of them we had nothing to do with. Maybe a genetic disorder, disease, car wreck. Some of them we brought on ourselves through misbehavior, poor decisions. But regardless of their source, their consequence can be despair. That's what this message is about. This book is a war on despair. The goal of this book is to help people have enough hope to get them through the tough time. Despair is when we make bad decisions, make the wrong assumptions, and turn to the wrong sources for help. Despair makes bad situations even worse. Despair says, I'll never get out of this. Despair says the shouting will never stop, the debt will never leave, the addiction will never minimize, the storms will never pass. That's just not true. That's just not true. And we can come in and help somebody who's in the middle of a dark time with not a flippant word of hope, but a word of hope that's grounded in Scripture. And that's exactly what people need to keep them from making bad decisions and to get them out of despair.
All right, so you selected Joseph as your character to glean from. What do you want us to get from him? Because it's a unique life, to say the least. And
it's a gret life because we have the whole life of Joseph, pretty much, you know, from as a teenager all the way through the end of his life. 2 or 3 things that I think are huge about Joseph. One is that he himself understood the purpose of suffering. At the end of his life, he told his brothers, you intended evil, but God intended this for good. You intended evil. So look what he's saying. He's saying, look, there's evil in the world. There's actually a philosophy that says if God was good and God was God, there'd be no evil. Well, that wasn't Paul's perspective, wasn't Joseph's perspective. There is in Scripture the acknowledgement of evil. But there is always this conviction that God trumps evil. In fact, the Scripture in Joseph's case says that God takes that evil and he reweaves it. He reuses it for something good. Mm-hmm. Now, there's nothing in the Bible that would say being sold by your brothers into captivity is good, or being falsely imprisoned is good. There's nothing in the Bible that says cancer is good, or the death of a child is good. What the Bible says, though, is that God can take all of those and he can work them together so that ultimately good happens. And that's what Joseph said. God took that evil and he used it to save the world from a famine, and he also used it to rescue Jacob and his sons and their extended family from barbaric Canaan, bring them into protective custody in Egypt, where they could grow from a tribe of 70 Bedouins into a nation of 1 million when it was time for them to return to the promised land. So the individual things were tough, but the collective result was good.
All right, we can look at Joseph, see that he got through this. In fact, he went on with incredible humility on the other side of that experience, because sooner or later his brothers came to him for corn, and he humbly served them. But what was it in Joseph from the beginning that gave him that resolve, that when he faced that tough time, he was able to go through it? Because so often, as you know as a pastor, Christians get hit with tragedy suddenly, and all of a sudden the bottom falls out, and they don't even know if they believe in God anymore.
What's unique about Joseph's story is that from the beginning, he believed that God had a dream for him. He is called Joseph the Dreamer for a reason. He walks into the story of Scripture, telling his brothers that he had this dream and that they were going to all bow down to him someday. Well, that doesn't go over well with the brothers. Then he tells the father and one of Jacob's wives a similar dream. So whether you like the fact that he told his brothers the dreams or not, whether we even know how to interpret the whole idea of God speaking to us through dreams, here's what we know. Joseph believed that God had a dream for him. And when he went to Egypt, that's all he had. His brothers took everything else. His brothers took his resources. His brothers took his clothing. His name didn't mean anything in Egypt. Even his profession. The Egyptians looked down on shepherds. So he didn't have anything going for him when he got to Egypt except this one fact. He believed that God had a destiny for him. I talk to people who are passing through tough times. After I hear what they're going through, I'll try to turn the conversation just a little bit by saying, now, I know you've lost a lot. But what do you still have that no one can take? What do you still have that no one can take? And the answer to that question has to at least include the destiny that God has for us.
Wow.
It's a destiny. So let's latch on to that. Cancer took your health. The bad economy took your job. And that's terrible. But you know what? Nobody can take your destiny. You're still God's child. You're still bound for heaven. Hang on to that. Nobody can touch that.
All right, let me take a break. We are with Max Lucado today, and one of the premier authors of our day, and his latest book, You'll Get Through This, and we got some great questions for him coming up in just a few moments.
Hi, I'm Paulina, and I work at theDove TV. Did you know that when you support theDove TV, you have a profound impact, not only in our community, but around the world? It's your continued support that takes the inspiration and hope in the programs we produce and makes them available to the thousands of people who are watching these videos online every week. Help bring encouragement and hope to our valley and beyond by making a secure online donation today at our website, thedove.us.
Okay, we're back with Max Lucado and his new book, You'll Get Through This, Hope and Help for Your Turbulent Times. There's a picture of it. Let me encourage you to check it out at Evangel or the discount bookstore there in Jacksonville, online at Barnes & Noble, or online at Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And it's a great resource. And Max, you said in your book, and only you could say this and get away with it, you say a lot of things that a lot of people wish they could say. But you said that God's deliverance in the Bible is like a Mardi Gras. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, bold, brassy, and everywhere, if I remember correct. And it is. It is. Every time you turn the page, God is getting somebody through something. Mm-hmm. Got Abraham through old age. He got Jacob through his own deceit. He got Joshua out of the wilderness into the promised land. Moses through the Red Sea. Jonah through the whale. Even the story of Jesus is the story of deliverance, right? Jesus placed on the cross, but he got through the sin. He got through death. God is a God who gets people through things. He doesn't leave us in the valley of the shadow of death, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow. So this is a constant theme in the Bible. That is, though times are tough today, God will get me through it. Now, I'm very careful in the book, as you know, to point out it may not be quick. Yeah. It may not be painless. But God can use this for something good. So in the meantime, don't be foolish. Don't take a short-term solution to a long-term problem. But don't despair either, because God is faithful, and he gets us through things.
I think that's one of the problems we have as believers. We'll read the Bible for encouragement. We'll flip through pages, and as we actually are flipping through decades. you know.
Exactly. Yeah, you read through the story of Joseph. You could have read it this morning before breakfast. It doesn't take that long to read, about 20 chapters that tell the story of Joseph. Really, fewer chapters than that. But when you think about, the long walk from Canaan or Beersheba all the way down to Egypt, and how many days and months that might have taken, the days on the auction block, those years in Potiphar's house, those years in prison. I mean, he had a lot of days in which he was just struggling, just like we are, wondering how long is this going to last.
Why is it important, or maybe I should ask, why do Christians identify themselves with their problem, with their catastrophe or their tragedy, and they hold on to that more than they do getting through it and getting on the other side?
Well, I'm not sure I know why we do that, but I know we do. We identify ourselves, hey, I'm the orphan, or I'm the divorcee. Yeah. I'm the cancer patient.
Right.
Yes, yeah, I understand that. But much more important, you're a child of God. You are not what happens to you. You are who God says you are. Part of our healing is trusting God's voice over our voice, and not allowing our tragedy to become our identity. Our tragedy can become our testimony. Boy, God got me through that divorce, or God got me through that debt. But we can't let our tragedy become our identity. In a morbid sort of way, sometimes we're so hungry for any identity that we're happy to be known as the one who has this problem. And that becomes comfortable. But God's destiny for us is that we be known as His children, not that we be known as our, misfits.
Often, and I know what people mean by this, and I've even been guilty of it myself. I've learned the hard way not to do this, but we say, oh, well, all things work together for the good. We recite Romans 8:28, or we say, well, God's in control. Well, those are both true, but they may not be comforting at the moment. They may not be the words to say when somebody's in the midst of their life being turned upside down.
That's really the difficult thing about this whole process. How do you communicate a truth without it coming across as a platitude, without it coming across as flippant and insincere? And, my only response to that is it's a case-by-case basis. In some situations, people want to hear truth the second you open your mouth, They're so desperate for somebody to give them some hope. Other people are in such pain. The last thing they want and the last thing they can stomach is somebody coming in and saying, remember, all things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to, so it's just a case-by-case thing. I don't think there's a quick and easy rule of thumb. If I encourage people to do anything, I say, listen first, preach second. Just take a minute to take the temperature of the person you're with. But there are cases where they want you to speak truth into their life and need it desperately. But if they're not there yet, that's okay. Your presence, just being there, is a word of truth.
All right. I realize there's a lot of tragedies, from accidents to, cancer, illness, things like that. But then there's a lot of injustices. And I know that a lot of Christians are just flat angry because something happened to them or somebody did something to them. A good case is what happened to Joseph by his brothers. When he got through the other side, he had the perfect setup for revenge, but he chose not to go down that road. Can you speak to that?
I'm so glad you brought that up. I think that's one of the great parts of Joseph's story, and that is he ultimately forgave his brothers. Can you make note that I said ultimately? I don't think it was easy for him. When you read the story of Joseph, the brothers come to Egypt because of the famine, looking for food. They don't recognize Joseph. And Joseph didn't disclose his identity. This is just my own thinking here. But I think he didn't disclose his identity because he wasn't sure he could forgive these things. He lets them experience what he experienced. He puts them in jail for a time, the equivalent of a pit. He lets them feel rejection like he felt. And in some ways, it's like he wants to get even. But then finally, good wins out. Finally, he discloses who he is. He cries again. Joseph cries in this story, I think, 6 times. He's a crying guy. The most emotional one is when he says, I am Joseph. And the brothers can't believe it. They've not recognized the prince of Egypt as their brother. And he forgives them. He asks about Jacob. And it's one of the sweetest moments in the Bible. He had to do that to get through that. He really did. Had he never forgiven his brothers, he would have maybe lived in the palace, but he would have lived in anger. Part of healing is forgiving. It's tough, but it's essential.
All right. Where does confession coming into healing? I mean, it could be the mess that somebody's in is self-caused, and they just need to kind of confess it and ask God to help them.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes a confession comes in because we just need to be honest with God about how we feel. Part of the teaching in the book is under the theme, pray your pain out. When you're passing through a tough time, it's not a good time to keep everything in. It's a good time to get everything out to God. Not always to get it out to people, because people don't quite understand what you're going through. God always understands what you're going So if you're going through a tough time, pray it out. Confess what you've done. If you're the one who caused the pain, you just don't hold anything back. You let God know. Or if you are a victim of pain, if somebody else was driving the car, somebody else ruined the economy, then you let God know. If you're upset, it's better to shake a fist at God than to turn your back on God. He doesn't mind it if you shake a fist at him. I mean, there's a book in the Bible called Lamentations. For that reason, the whole book's dedicated to Jeremiah's complaints. It doesn't bother God. So you'll just shake a fist at him. That's okay.
What do you think about the index card size plan? What do you mean by that?
Well, the way that Joseph guided the people through the famine, his solution was so practical. We're going to save up for 7 years of feast, during the feasts, during the good years. During the bad years, we will distribute what we collected in the good years. The reason I put that in the book is because when we pass through a crisis, we need a plan. We don't need anything super complicated. Mm-hmm. He could put his on an index card. And so when people are passing through a tough time, a very practical thing to do is create an index card size plan. What are 3 things you can do today? Well, I can see if they're hiring at the Burger King. I can prepare a resume. I can network with people who are looking for employees. Instead of getting depressed that you've lost your job, come up with a plan. 3, 4 things you can do, put them on an index card, tape that to your mirror, to your refrigerator, and you'll already begin the healing process because you'll have something tangible you can do. Again, the war is against despair. Mm-hmm. We're trying to battle despair. How do you battle despair? Well, you create hope by developing a plan.
All right, the book is called You'll Get Through This, and Hope and Help for Your Turbulent Times by New York Times bestselling author Max Lucado, and I'm sure you've read some of his books in the past. I loved your Grace book, Max. It was just terrific, and thank you for doing it. My last question is, what would you say to somebody in the middle of their crises, their tough time? They would say to you, Pastor Max, I just don't think I can make it one more day.
Then I would say, could you make it one more minute? 5 more minutes, mm-hmm. You know, just hang in there. I would say what we've already said. I would say, what do you have that you've never lost, that no one can take? I would urge them to look for something for which to be grateful. I would ask them to reconsider their view of God, because anybody who says that is seeing God as a small God who does not have the ability to get them through it. So I would, just give enough hope. Do my best to give them just enough hope. What we're trying to do is change the mindset from despair to hope, mm-hmm. and in speaking that hope into someone's life. It's a gift when you can bring hope into someone's life. You're just giving them a wonderful.
Well, you're an inspiration and delight. What's next for you? Are you working on something new? Can you share with us?
Yeah. Let's see. I finished a book on prayer that will be next year's book. Mm-hmm. It's called The Pocket Prayer. It's a prayer for people who struggle to pray. I'm working on some fiction things right now. I wrote a book called Christmas Cross that's going to come out as a movie at Christmas. And we're really excited about that. I think that's going to be fun. So anyway,
Well, come to Oregon. We'll let you catch some big salmon.
That'd be great. Thank you. That would be fun. Maybe some.
Okay. Thanks, Max. God bless you, friend. What a delight to have you today.
Thank you. All the best.
Well, one terrific guy, believe me, and you may want to get that new book. You'll get through it. It's a great resource. Well, coming up next, possibly the next governor of the state of Oregon in the studio with me. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Daniel and I work at theDove TV. You know, compared to Portland, Seattle, and LA, Medford might be considered a small market, but at theDove, we're excited about the opportunity to make a big impact right here in our community. And you help make that happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us now by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us. or by phoning 541-776-5368.
Well, it's always a delight to have Dennis Richardson in the house, but now he's wearing a different hat. Candidate for governor, Dennis Richardson, and certainly still sitting representative from Southern Oregon. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing very well.
Good to see you.
Nice
Good to see you.
Good to be here.
You don't look too beat up. It's only been a couple of weeks.
No, I'm all in. I retired from my law practice in Central Point, and it's all about representing this state. I have one client now, and that is the population, the people, the average folks. And I've been that way in the legislature. And now to be running for governor is it's a wonderful opportunity to get all over the state, meet with people, and listen to their concerns. What are the problems? What is keeping our economy from flourishing? We've got such a wonderful state.
Yeah.
We have natural resources, deep water ports. We're on the West Coast. We have human resources, good education system, and we have people that want to work. But we continue with high unemployment. In fact, it just went up to 8% when the national average went down. We have to have a change in leadership, and that is going to happen at the ballot box.
All right, let me back up, because you can get into campaign mode real easy.
I can.
But let me ask you this. Running for governor, I mean, what made you decide to do this?
Well, Kathy and I struggled for a long time over whether or not we could do this. It means leaving the House, and I won't be able to run for re-election. And so as of a year from November, I'll either be the governor or I'll be out of government service, and I'll go into other service. It's okay. But we just felt that what I've learned in the legislature is extremely valuable. Being co-chair of Ways and Means and being down in the legislative fiscal office where you actually craft the budgets and to see how things really happen, it's very important information. But unless you can implement policy changes, whoever has the power just does what they want.
You have been kind of noted as the budget hawk. I mean, you serving in that co-chair capacity got you right down to the nitty-gritty of all this stuff. And you came out with your eyes kind of wide open, didn't you?
Really did. When we had a 30-30 split in the House, and I was co-chair of Ways and Means with Peter Buckley, and then the other co-chair was Senator Richard Devlin, so you had two Democrats and then myself as a conservative Republican. It was interesting to see the approach to budgeting. I mean, their approach is, let's go ahead and see what we want to spend and then figure out where the money is going to come from. And I said, no. You can't do that in your home. You first have to see how much money do you have to spend, and then you prioritize your spending, and then when you run out of money, you quit spending. And so we struggled with that difference in perspective for a few weeks. And finally, because we couldn't go forward unless all three of us agreed, we decided that we would look at it that way.
All right, so after great consideration, you and your wife taking long walks, thinking about this, praying about this, you decided to jump in. It's a big thing, isn't it?
It's huge. I mean, we have a large state. And so I'm all over the state. I'm spending a substantial amount of time in Multnomah County, Clackamas, and Washington County, and then all over the rest of the state, and that'll increase as time goes on. I want to take a large trip in October and early November around rural Oregon and get to places I've never been before and talk to people who don't often get heard and listen to what they have to say.
Of course, as you know, I ran for the 2nd Congressional District, and you talk about rural Oregon. I mean, you'll stop in places where there's 5 or 6 people. That's right. But that's grassroots America. It's grassroots Oregonians.
It is. And to win, I have to have turnout. I have to have people that will believe that we can save our state, that we can change its course and not just stay home. They need to vote.
All right, let's get into some of this. Is there enough money to do what we need to do?
Oh, absolutely.
All right.
I mean,
that's pretty simple.
In 2011-13, we have a 2-year budget for Oregon. It was 10% higher than it was the 2 years before that. And now we've just finished crafting the 2013-15 budget, and it's 13% higher than it was in the last 2 years. And yet, what we're told is, I have to have tax increases. After all, it's for the kids. And I mean, we had this great scene. I wish it would have been filmed. The governor comes into the Republican House caucus. It's end of June, and it's toward the end of the session. And he says, I really need your help. We need a few votes to raise these taxes, because with another $275 million, we can help the kids' education, we can help with mental health for the kids. This is really for the kids, and I need your help. So I raise my hand, I say, Governor, the Democrats control the House, the Senate, and you're the governor. If this was an important priority, you could have done this last March. Now, I understand the political game. You come in at the end so that you can blame the Republicans for blocking you from doing other additional spending. But since you control everything, all we give you is a quorum, and you have a 13% increase in spending. I mean, $2 billion of more money. How do you expect us to really, take you seriously on this? And he kind of said, well, Dennis, you understand how the game's played.
And that was his answer?
Well, he said, you understand how this goes.
Yeah, okay.
Something like that. He had no answer, because he had delayed implementing and passing the K-12 budget with the Democrats' leadership in the House and the Senate all the way to the end of June. So you have school districts that don't know how much money they're really going to get, and they could have had it in March, as we did when I was co-chair of Ways and Means. We passed the K-12 budget first instead of leaving it to the very end.
So we know that can be done.
It can be done.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's just politics as usual. I like the governor, nice guy, but leadership is not defined by your promises, it's by the outcomes. He's had 3 terms, and in baseball, 3 strikes and you're out. I mean, we still have unemployment that's higher than the national average, and it's been that way since 1996, which was shortly after he first became governor. And we have 1/3 of our students not graduating with their classmates from high school. I mean, this cannot be allowed to continue, and it will as long as you have a manager of a bureaucracy instead of a leader of the state.
All right. Now, so there's enough money to do what we need to do. And how come we never talk about wage freeze, hiring freeze, and cuts? How come we never talk about that?
Because the public sector unions control the building. I mean, they are the ones that collect wages, high amounts from, their fees from the wages of all of the public service employees, and they use a high percentage of that to recruit and fund campaigns for Democratic candidates who then can win and come into the legislature to make sure that the power that they control remains in their control. And it is an incestuous situation that impedes any progress, real progress in our state, and it has to be faced head on. I mean, the unions hate to have this be discussed openly, but it's the reality. We must change it.
Just kind of jumping around a little bit, do you expect a special session to handle the PERS issue, or are they just going to kick it through the primary season?
I wouldn't be surprised if we have a special session. Of course, all the people should be saying, if you couldn't solve it in a 5 or 6 month session, why would we think we're going to solve it now?
Well, but this governor's got a history of, what, 5 special sessions, 6 special sessions? I mean, he kind of likes them.
Well, what he does is he negotiates behind closed doors, and he tries to make it attractive to get the votes lined up before you hold the special session. So basically, the discussion is, we want to change some of the PERS provisions, because, they don't say this, but because they're going to hurt us in the next election. And so we want to tweak it a little bit, and if you'll give us a tax increase, meaning enough votes to have the supermajority needed, so you have to have some Republican votes, then we'll give this change in the PERS system, and it'll be a little better than what it is right now. And so the Republicans are saying, okay, let's get this straight. You know you need to fix PERS. You're not going to fix it, but you want to tweak it to get rid of that $350 million can kicking problem, which we could talk about, where you get, you delay a payment for 2 years, and you end up losing $500 million in additional interest and $500 million in investment. So delaying a payment of $350 million for 2 years costs $1 billion in direct and indirect money for the taxpayers. Anyway, they want to get rid of that. That's a real embarrassment to them, but they did it without a single Republican vote. And so they say, so come back in and give us the additional tax increase, and we'll do what we should have done to begin with. But it still will not fix PERS, because the unions are not about to allow anything that would affect their current employees. It's only put the burden on those that have already retired.
I've been reading some of these public retirement articles and blogs, and Oregon was listed in there as a 50-50 chance of it going under.
Wow.
50% chance of it hitting the wall.
Yeah.
And we're acting it's a 2% problem.
Those that are in control now the Democratic leaders that we have, in my opinion, I mean, I don't know if this is absolutely positive, but from what I know about them, they've never signed the front of an employment check. I mean, they've never been an employer. They've never gone without getting paid to make sure that their staff and employees get paid. And so it's always been, the money will come if you just get more people to pay in. So we can do good with other people's money, and it's always about rich people paying their fair share without realizing that rich people leave the state and they need to come in because they're investors, they're entrepreneurs and inventors, and they're the ones that create businesses that grow, which creates jobs. And so we continue down this path of mediocrity because we don't have the vision of what it takes to have an economy that welcomes people and also utilizes natural resources in a respectful, and rational manner.
All right, now there's enough money. We got a spending problem. We got a public retirement problem that's mounting, and unemployment went up. I mean, this is not a rosy picture for the governor. And I want to take a break. When we come back, I want you to tell me, if you were governor for a day, what would you do to get jobs back in the state of Oregon? I mean, something that would stop that number today, all right? Dennis Richardson's with us. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Paula, and I work at theDove TV. Every day we get letters and emails from people who've been encouraged, blessed, and challenged by the programs on theDove TV. But we couldn't do it without you. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to bring inspiration and hope to our community by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or call us at 541-776-5368.
Okay, we're back with Representative Dennis Richardson, who is now candidate for governor for the state of Oregon. And I think perhaps you have a little bit of a new record. Aren't you the earliest to get in?
No, have
there been others?
There's a man named John Gustafson who
was in earlier than you. Oh, that's right.
He got in. Yeah. And there's people talking about it. Realize you can't really file for the position until after September 12th. And so,
but you can announce anytime.
You can announce whenever you want.
Yeah,
I've talked to him. He's a nice guy.
Yeah. So 15 months or so, 16.
15 months. But it's necessary to get 51% of the votes.
Yeah.
See, we've got 39% of our registered voters are Democrat, 31% are Republican, and then about 30% are non-affiliated and other small parties and groups. And so I need to get turnout from the Republicans. I need to get turnout from the blue dog Democrats, the Democrats who are willing to say that, what we're doing is not working.
Are there any left?
There's several.
Really? Good. Well,
actually, I'm getting a lot of response. The newsletter I've been sending out for years has really gained a lot of attention, not just with Republicans, but with people all over the state.
Yeah.
And so they write me back and they say, I'm a Democrat and I don't agree with you on a lot of things, but I really do appreciate your position on balancing the budget and those kinds of things.
Yeah, I used your newsletter. It made me sound real smart on the budget.
Well, good.
All right, so you're governor for a day. We have back into the 8% unemployment. We're not attracting new businesses, and even Jackson County is not recovering. What would you do to get jobs back in the state?
Well, first thing, it's taken us 20 years to get in this position, and it's not going to be fixed in a day. It also depends on who's in the legislature.
Right.
If the Republicans were to take the majority in the House and the Senate, then it would be possible to make major changes. If it doesn't, then the governor becomes the representative, the advocate for our state across the nation and into foreign countries. And I've been going to China for 10 years, and China is now our largest export destination for services and products, and I mean it's several $1 billion of revenue that comes into Oregon from Chinese consumers, and that will continue. What I would immediately do is begin working with the administrative rules that we have to lessen the burdens on government. It's amazing, on business. And just last week, Kathy went into our cleaners, the dry cleaners in Central Point, and the proprietor said, I want your husband know I will be supporting him. And she says, oh really, why is that? So he says, look at this letter. And he shows this letter from the Department of Environmental Quality, the DEQ, saying that his fees were going up 20%. He said, my income hasn't gone up 20%. I've had no claims. It is just beyond my comprehension to see the government continue to pile on fees, penalties, fines, regulations that impede growth. So I'd like to expand my business. I would like to hire more people, but I can't do that when I don't have any consistency. I don't know what is going to come down next from Salem.
Is there any possibility of getting back to administrative oversight? I mean, why do these agencies have this arbitrary power to raise fees without some kind of a legislative review or overview?
Only because the legislature has allowed it to happen. They can make their changes by administrative rule, and then sometimes, some cases they will raise fees or costs and then come to the legislature in the following session and retroactively get approval for what they've already done. And they're not supposed to do that, but they say in times of emergency they can do that. It's a situation where the bureaucracies have become so powerful that it's the tail wagging the dog. I mean, we need to empower employees of the state to be civil servants. They need to be trained. They need to have the ability to make decisions and when problems come up, and we need to trust them. But instead, we've got multiple layers of management, fiefdoms, silos, and it's always about expanding the bureaucracy and increasing the costs. And that's something that it's bad for business, it's bad in government, and it needs to stop.
Was a precedent set when the governor gave Nike a little bit special incentive to expand? Can that little act be expanded to other companies?
Well, it certainly can, and the Republicans wanted that to happen in the last session. But realize that what Nike said was they didn't get anything extra. They said, we want to know that you're not going to change the tax policy on us. And so what they got was a guarantee that things would stay the same. That is what business wants, is they want to be able to know that the game isn't going to change if they're going to make major investments into infrastructure and hiring and expanding in Oregon. They want to know that 5 years from now, the tax structure and so forth will be the same, and they won't be upside down in an economy that is controlled by a government instead of one where the government makes it a level playing field.
Would you consider a hiring freeze for the government, for the state?
Well, I think that I would certainly consider that, because we need to know where we're at before we just continue to grow. The social services and health services have increased by over 40% in their expenditures in recent years, where we passed a bill that will clear the way to add 250,000 more Oregonians to the Oregon Health Plan, to Medicaid, in the next 2 years. And these are people that will get government subsidies at up to 400% of the federal poverty level. So you have a family of 4 that can earn $92,000 a year and still get taxpayer subsidized health care for them, for their family, that's being paid for by new teachers that don't make half of that.
All right, a couple of other questions that we're getting emailed in. What do you think about the GMOs and that whole area, that problem, especially in Southern Oregon? There's a move here on that.
To me, it's a very serious issue. I have people on both sides that want me to take a firm position on it, and I say, show me the science. I want to make a rational decision, because there's arguments on both sides. I mean, I want healthy food for my family and for everyone else. I also know that we're, as a nation, are feeding other countries, and they're depending on our ability to produce. And so I want not opinions, not passion, but I want the evidence, and I want to see where the evidence comes from.
All right, well, part of the export to China is food involved in that?
Oh yeah, wheat and...
Okay, so if it's got GMO problems and they reject it, what did we do to ourselves?
Oh, it would be disastrous. But presently, there are federal regulations against using GMO for wheat. And so we had that problem that occurred up in northeastern Oregon. They still don't know the source of the GMO seed that kind of got mixed in. But anyway, they've checked all over the state, and it was in a very, very localized area, and it's not a problem at this point.
What happens if a county passes an anti-GMO policy? Can the state override that?
It would have to be determined. I mean, that's something that...
Because we're kind of heading down that road, aren't we?
I think so.
Yeah.
The federal government tries to tell states, you can't, we're going to preempt everything, until the states push back. The counties are told by the state, you can't do this, we're going to preempt things. And the state has the right to do that. Presently, they have not preempted it, in my opinion. And so it will be determined by the courts and by the system whether or not it would stand.
As governor, what would you say to, just a couple examples, say Josephine County, Curry County, that's really running low on funds, closing jails. Now, Curry County is just right on the edge of bankruptcy. What would you say to those people? What could you do to help them? Well,
first thing, I think the governor ought to be camping out in Washington, D.C. I mean, several years ago, I called a high-level official back in the Medicare division, it's called CMS, and was asking them about making changes and so forth. And they said, Representative, let me tell you how it really works here in Washington. You're a representative of your district, but there are 50 governors, and we are over 50 states. And so when a governor who represents all of the state wants something done, we pay attention and we have to respond accordingly. When it's a legislator, then it's just your opinion for your district, and we understand that.
Yeah, you could be gone in 2 years.
That's right. And so I said, thank you very much for saving me time and effort. I understand. I believe the governor needs to be doing more. I believe he needs to be more aggressive. I think that look at these various points. Kansas has 1% of their land within their boundaries that's federally controlled, federally owned. Nebraska has 2%. North Dakota has 3%. Oregon has 53% of our land mass controlled by the federal government. Something's happened in between those states and ours. And no compensation.
And no feedback, no nothing.
Well, originally it happened because governors didn't want the cost of having to take care of land that they thought was really something they couldn't utilize. So the federal government creates the Bureau of Land Management. But now is different. And we need to have management of our forests in a rational way, not just continue to have them be ignored because of timidity in Washington, D.C. and fear of federal lawsuits.
We have thousands of acres burning as we speak in the state of Oregon that could rival the Biscuit Fire that we saw back in the early 2000s when President Bush came out and went out there. And there they sat. Unbelievable potential for resource and money. In fact, it even tied education to some of that revenue, and it went nowhere. And we're going to repeat this thing again. What could you do as governor to say, all right, you got all this thing burned up, the least we can do is get in there and clean it up and salvage something?
Well, you have to be willing to take a stand that's good for Oregon and not be kowtowing to the federal government because of the fear of losing funds. I mean, it's all about money ultimately, and we're dependent on the federal government for their funding, and they kind of quietly say, understand, if you take us on issues, that could affect your funding. They're not supposed to say that, but that is the fear. I would be back in D.C., I'd be testifying before Congress, I'd be working with our federal elected officials to lobby and gain support for being able to utilize healthy forests, to create healthy forests. By doing nothing, we only invite further catastrophe. That's no longer an option as far as I'm concerned for our state.
All right, and of course you're dealing with an administration now that's anything but friendly to our arguments. So you it could be a little tough. Listen, we got only about less than a minute to go. How do people get a hold of you? Want to learn more about your campaign? What's the best way to correspond?
At DennisRichardson.com.
All right.
Just go to the internet. DennisRichardson.com is the campaign website, and we respond to all questions, inquiries. We need help. We need volunteers. We need contributions, talent, time, and treasure.
Okay.
Help us win.
You have position papers there yet?
Not yet.
Okay, you will be.
The newsletters that I've sent have served like that.
This is just the beginning, I'm sure, of many visits, Dennis, and thanks and best to you, my friend, okay? We'll see you next time on Focus Today.
Hi, I'm Jim and I work at theDove TV. Every weekday between 6 and 8 a.m., our award-winning news and sports team bring you the best morning show around. It's live, it's honest, and it's a whole lot of fun. And you help make it happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to air local programs that share your voice by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us.